All right, guys, so there's been talk about Ron DeSantis in conservative circles about whether or not he is truly anti-establishment, because Ron DeSantis, for the most part, has kind of an establishment upbringing. Not that he's actually cool with the establishment Republicans in Washington. I don't think he's very close with them as he came up in the Freedom Caucus. But people have questions about whether or not he is truly anti-establishment, and if he was to become president, would he go along with the uniparty, okay? The establishment Republicans, establishment Democrats, who, you know, have most of the influence in Washington. And there's no doubt that because establishment Republicans are basically begging the guy to run, that they're going to get behind him and try to control and influence him. That's just kind of how politics works. They see him as the guy that can take down Trump, that they do have some control over, that they may be able to control in some way. Okay, we know they don't like Trump because Trump is not controllable, right? They can't control Trump, so that's why they hate him. But the question with Ron DeSantis is, again, if he is truly anti-establishment, how anti-establishment is he? And he's answering some of those questions as he's basically declared a war on Big Pharma because of the vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines, and the CDC in regards to their hypocrisy when it comes to their response to the pandemic and the COVID lockdown measures. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, I'm just going to say this. If people have questions about how anti-establishment Ron DeSantis is, he's trying to answer those questions, right? He really is with this move right here, as he has asked the Florida Supreme Court to impanel a grand jury to investigate the wrongdoings linked to the COVID-19 vaccine, including spreading false and misleading claims about the efficacy of the doses. Now, again, we all remember how the narrative changed on the vaccine the longer they were out, right? At first, we were told that they were basically a miracle drug, okay? That all our problems would be solved. And then it quickly became clear once people actually started to get COVID, right, even though they were vaccinated, that, you know, some of these claims were misleading, right? We were misled when it came to the effects and the efficacy of the vaccine. And Ron DeSantis is, again, basically declaring war on big pharma companies for misleading people, allegedly misleading people about the vaccine. Take a look.
Florida, you know, it is against the law to mislead and to misrepresent, particularly when you're talking about the efficacy of a drug. We see just recently, Florida got $3.2 billion through legal action against those responsible for the opioid crisis. And so it's not like this is something that's unprecedented. So today, I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. And we anticipate that we will get the approval for that. That will be something that will be impaneled, most likely in the Tampa Bay area, and that will come with legal processes that will be able to get more information and to bring legal accountability for those who committed misconduct.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, the blue check liberals and the mainstream liberal media, they're going to be freaking out about this, okay? They're going to be losing their minds because Ron DeSantis is basically doing what progressives and liberals claim that they believe in, right? Which is holding Big Pharma accountable, right? Going against Big Pharma, okay? There's nothing more anti-establishment than going against Big Pharma, and that is what Ron DeSantis is doing, okay? Because I just remember the days of when people got vaccinated, when the vaccine first came out, and people had ideas about the vaccine in regards to what it could do and what it could prevent. People still was getting the virus and they called it a breakthrough case. Well, this is a rare breakthrough case, right? And people went out and got the vaccine believing things about it that just simply weren't true, right? And they just objectively weren't true, but that didn't stop the Biden administration and Fauci and all the others from coming out here and again trying to imply that you were going to get some type of protection from the vaccine that you weren't actually going to get. And then all of a sudden, it just became commonplace and commonly accepted that, you know, even if you are vaccinated, you can still get and spread the virus. Again, it's just funny how all this stuff developed over time. And I think Big Pharma should answer some questions for it. But again, the mainstream liberal media and blue check liberals, they're upset about this. They can't stand this, okay? This guy, James Sarawicki, who wrote for the New Yorker, okay? He says, DeSantis going full anti-vax. Quite amazing given how many Floridians died in 2021 and early 2022 because they weren't vaccinated. But not surprising given his appointment of the crank Ladapo as his Surgeon General. Yeah, so to me, that sounds racist because his Surgeon General is black. And any criticism of a black person, especially a black public official, is racist according to the Democrat. It has to come from a place of racism, so this guy must be a flaming racist, okay? But it doesn't stop there. As the Washington Post put this headline out about Ron DeSantis and him forming a panel to counter the CDC, which is a move that is being decried by health professionals. So basically, Ron DeSantis is forming his own state-level panel to basically check the CDC and their recommendations in Florida. Right. So he said, look, we're going to have our own panel that is going to give out recommendations like the CDC that can serve as, again, counter to the CDC in situations where the CDC is clearly being hypocritical and not following a standard. They're being overtly political, which is exactly what happened in the middle of the pandemic when they allowed the BLM protests to go on as if nothing was happening in the middle of a pandemic, but yet they criticized any large gathering that did not fit the Democrat agenda that Democrats didn't like. And Ron DeSantis clearly pointed out this hypocrisy in this meeting as well, which I think was amazing. Take a look.
Finally, and this is exciting, we've seen over the past few years really the bankruptcy of the public health establishment. You know, we've seen a lot of ridiculous partisanship. I mean, I'll never forget that after hectoring people in April of 2020, you can't leave your house. They were all upset at Florida because people were on the beach and playing golf and all this stuff, that if you left your house, you were almost like a bad person until you started to have George Floyd protests. And you had massive numbers of people that are meeting to protest. And these public health people wrote a letter where like hundreds, maybe thousands of them signed saying, yes, we don't think you should be leaving your house normally, but we endorse the protests, and basically said that it was important that people went out, even in big groups, and protested. And then they said in the letter that does not mean they support protests for other things, like people that wanted to protest lockdowns. And so if that just didn't take the mask off and just show, you know, that this is all just a huge political farce, I don't know what is. But the reality is, even this in May of June of 2020, I think you've continued to see people in these bureaucracies and in this establishment behave in ways that have totally squandered any type of confidence or goodwill that people would have. And our CDC at this point, anything they put out, you just assume at this point that it's not worth the paper that it's printed on. And so it's not serving a useful function. It's really serving to advance narratives rather than do evidence-based medicine. And
yeah, I mean, he clearly has a point. I will never forget, and this is where you kind of become red pill on this stuff, right? I will never forget CNN's coverage of a Trump White House event in which they were clearly socially distanced, and they were also wearing masks. In the footage, in the CNN footage that they were commenting on, but the CNN was questioning whether or not it was a super spreader event. But they never questioned anything the Democrats did as a super spreader event. They didn't question the protests, the riots. They didn't question any of that stuff. But anything that was done by Republicans, Trump, conservatives, whether it be the anti-lockdown, whatever, all those things were anti-vax, anti-science, super spreader events. And they were criticized by the mainstream liberal media and the CDC, and Fauci always had something to say about it, right? But Democrats were partying, having fun, you know, not socially distancing, not wearing a mask, not following any of the rules. They were doing it all behind closed doors, living their lives while telling everybody else that, hey, you know, you shouldn't be able to live your life, right? And if you try to live your life, then you're a dangerous person. You're a super spreader. You're killing folks. This is what they said. And this was perpetuated by the CDC because a lot of this stuff was political. The CDC had became an arm of the Democrat Party and their propaganda, right? And as the science evolved over time, the CDC and their recommendations did not evolve, right? I also remember the Democrats being very anti-CDC under Trump, right? When they were afraid of the idea of the vaccine coming out too early under Trump because of Operation Warp Speed. They were afraid of that, and they basically was full-blown anti-vax. I remember that as well, too. So I'm just saying, those were some crazy times. Lastly, what Ron DeSantis said at this meeting that I think is definitely noteworthy and very personal to me is about the hypocrisy of social media and censorship around the claims regarding the vaccine, the pandemic, and the virus. That, you know, hey, if you're on the right, initially when you say these things, it's a conspiracy until it's eventually proven to be a fact. And if you're on the left, it is a fact until it's eventually proven to be a conspiracy. And Ron DeSantis, again, called out the censorship from big tech around the conversation with COVID, the vaccine, and the pandemic.
You know, part of this issue and other issues with COVID, goes back to an attempt to enforce one acceptable narrative on all these issues. And, you know, you saw it with the censorship of Dr. Bhattacharya with Twitter. You also saw it with Dr. Fauci and some of these people saying that they needed to go after these people who wrote the Great Barrington Declaration. They wanted to not contest the ideas in that. They basically wanted to smear them because they didn't want to have any criticism of their lockdown policies. And so part of the reason I think it's been a bad response is because from the very beginning you had a lot of arrogance that it's our way or the highway, and anyone that offers any type of a dissenting opinion. And they were censoring from day one. People that would write anti-lockdown things in March of 2020, April 2020, some of those would get taken down off some of these big tech platforms. And so we saw that over and over again. And I think that ultimately, your policies or your positions or your analysis of this medical science should stand on its own. And if it's not able to accept criticism, if you can't defend the policy against valid criticism, then maybe you need to be looking in the mirror. But that's not what these elites wanted to do. They wanted to just cocoon themselves from any criticism and to try to denigrate anybody that had a different way of thinking. So I think with the Twitter, what Elon Musk is doing, I think there's going to be a lot more that comes out with that. And I think that that's very important. But I think it's also important to say, Twitter is not even close to most of the censorship, what was going on. They're a much smaller company than like a Google or YouTube or some of these others. And I guarantee you everything that was going on in Twitter is going on in these others, if not even more so. And we got a sense of that when they went after us for having the opposing the masks, having the experts oppose the masks for these young kids.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis, once again, 100% on point. Telling it like it is. Saying the things that I basically say every single day. But I'm just saying, Ron DeSantis, man, again, if people got questions about whether or not he's anti-establishment, this is anti-establishment as he gets. He's going after Big Pharma. He's going after CDC. He's going after Big Tech. I don't understand what more can he do to prove himself to be anti-establishment, even though he may have an establishment-ish type of background and the way he kind of came up, Ivy League, military. I don't think that matters all that much considering what the guy is actually doing. Okay, I just hope that he stays the course and that this is not just to try to propel his eventual 2024 presidential campaign if he decides to declare. I hope that this is stuff that he actually is going to follow through on and that he's going to try to make some lasting change. But outside of that, I mean, he's running laps around every other Republican I can think of, whether they be governors, especially governors, or, these establishment politicians, Republicans in Washington. He's leading the Republican Party. I mean, as of right now, he is from a policy perspective, right? He is leading the Republican Party. I mean, that's just a fact. Okay, nobody's doing a better job than he is right now, and he just continues to pick up W after W after W after W, and he's not taking L's, right? He's not taking any L's. He's not having any unforced errors. He is simply just picking up the W's where he can pick them up. He's been very politically strategic, and he's just positioned himself to have a strong GOP primary if he continues to do this, and this is what the polls are showing as well too. And he's also leading in some polls against Joe Biden when it comes to the 2024 presidential race. So Ron DeSantis, man, I mean, he's on point, right? He is basically everything that you could ask for from a conservative politician that, you know, potentially is going to be president. I can't really think of too many things to be critical of him for. But, you know, again, it's just one of those things where you can obviously see that the guy really has his finger on the pulse of the base of the Republican Party and conservatives. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.